There are stories in the Bible so dark, so shocking, that they've been hidden, ignored, even censored for centuries. Today, we're about to unveil one such chapter, Judges 19, a story that will not only send chills down your spine, but also change how you see humanity, sin, and God's grace. This is a forbidden secret, a buried truth, but it carries lessons that can shake your heart to its core. Are you brave enough to face this truth? This story isn't for the faint of heart. It will unsettle you, perhaps stir deep emotions, but it will also unlock profound lessons about how a nation, and even we ourselves, can lose our way when we drift from God. What if I told you that this painful story, though agonizing, is a key to understanding God's plan, even in chaos? What if what you're about to hear isn't just history, but a mirror reflecting something deeper about human nature and divine mercy? Are you ready to embark on this journey? Brace yourself, because what you're about to discover will change how you view the Bible forever. If you're ready to turn the pages of Judges with me and uncover this hidden truth, drop the number 777 in the comments to show you're in. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss this journey. Your support will help spread this story to those who need to hear it most. Imagine a nation that once witnessed God's mighty miracles. The Red Sea parting, water gushing from a rock in the desert, the walls of Jericho collapsing with only trumpets and prayers. That was Israel, God's chosen people, bound by a covenant with Him, sworn to faithfulness and obedience to His law. But in the time of the book of Judges, the light of those glorious days had dimmed, like a flame flickering in the wind. The Bible records a short but weighty sentence. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Judges 21:25. This wasn't just about the absence of a king on a throne. It was the absence of a spiritual center, a voice guiding the people back to God. In this era, Israel was like a ship without a rudder, adrift in a stormy sea. Without a king, without a unified leader, the tribes lived separately, each governing itself, sometimes clashing with one another. The law of Moses, once their compass, was now neglected, like a scroll of parchment forgotten in the corner of a temple. The judges, leaders raised by God, came to rescue the people from enemies, but they couldn't fill the void of a nation that had forgotten its covenant. Each person decided what was right, not based on God's word, but on their own desires. Picture a society where clear moral boundaries no longer exist. One person might say, "This is right for me," while another responds, "But for me, it's different." No one takes responsibility. No one stands up to correct wrongs. The result is chaos creeping in, like thick fog blanketing a valley, obscuring all light. The tribes, once united in their fight to claim the promised land, now lived in division. Stories of violence, injustice, and indifference began to emerge, like cracks in the walls of a once sturdy house. To understand this better, think of a large family without a leader. When no one sets rules or offers correction, siblings begin to argue, misunderstand, even hurt one another. Israel in those days was such a family, but on the scale of an entire nation. The decay didn't happen overnight. It came through small choices, moments of turning a blind eye, times when they chose their own way over God's. In the darkness of this chaos, a story is about to unfold, a story so dark, so horrifying, that it's been hidden for centuries, like a secret no one dares mention. A nation once led by God now stands on the brink of collapse, and the tale of a Levite will lay bare this painful truth. Are you ready to step in and discover what pushed Israel to this edge? In the remote hill country of Ephraim, a Levite steps into the story. he's not just an ordinary wanderer on dusty roads. As a member of the tribe of Levi, he carries a sacred calling to serve in the tabernacle, preserve the law, and guide the people in worship. But in this chaotic time, even those called to holiness cannot escape human struggles. Living far from Jerusalem, far from the heart of worship, this Levite seems to be drifting, not just geographically, but spiritually. He takes a concubine from Bethlehem in the land of Judah, a city of captivating beauty, but riddled with contradictions. Bethlehem, where Jesus would later be born, was at this time a place where hope and unrest intertwined. The concubine, unnamed in the Bible, is a mystery. Who was she? A young woman with unfulfilled dreams, or a lost soul seeking freedom in a world without order? The Bible doesn't say, only noting that she was unfaithful and left him to return to her father's house in Bethlehem. Judges 19:2. But the phrase unfaithful raises more questions than answers. Did she betray him, perhaps in a moment of weakness through infidelity? Or was it a silent cry for help, a way to escape a relationship where she felt trapped? In that culture, a concubine held a lower status than a wife. She was often seen as property, a dependent woman with little voice or power. Perhaps she felt confined, unloved, unvalued. Or maybe, in a society where the law had faded, she simply sought an escape, a safer place, even if only temporary. 4 months passed. 4 months of silence, 4 months of separation, like an unhealed wound between them. Picture the Levite during those days, alone in Ephraim. As a man with a spiritual calling, he likely wrestled with pride, wondering whether to go after her or let her return on her own. Did he feel betrayed? Or did he blame himself for failing to keep her? He was human, with complex emotions: hurt, anger, perhaps even loneliness. This relationship, fragile as a thin thread stretched between two hills, mirrors the fragility of Israel at that time. A nation, a family, an individual, all can unravel when disconnected from their sacred source. What drove the concubine to leave? Did she find safety in Bethlehem? Or was it just a fleeting illusion? And when the Levite decided to go after her, did he realize this choice would pull them both into an inescapable storm? After 4 months of silence, the Levite could wait no longer. He left the hills of Ephraim, traveling across rugged, dusty roads to reach Bethlehem. This was no simple journey. It was a quest driven by pride, hope, and perhaps unease. He didn't send a message or rely on a go-between. He went himself to find his concubine, as if to confront her, their past, and himself. The road from Ephraim to Judah was not just a physical path, but an inner journey, where he faced questions. Would she want to return? Could he forgive her? Or was he simply seeking to reclaim what was his? When he arrived in Bethlehem, something unexpected happened. Instead of conflict or tension, he was welcomed with open arms by the concubine's father. The old man, living in Bethlehem, seemed overjoyed to see his son-in-law. He prepared feasts, laid out lavish meals, poured wine freely, and urged him to stay. Remain here, eat, rest a little longer. For 5 days straight, the Levite tried to leave with his concubine to return home. But each time, the father pleaded, "Just one more night, don't go yet." The Bible describes his persistence as almost obsessive, as if he were clinging to something precious or delaying something dreadful. Picture the scene: a cozy house in Bethlehem, firelight flickering on stone walls, the aroma of freshly baked bread filling the air, laughter echoing during meals. The concubine, perhaps sitting quietly, watched her father and the Levite talk. But beneath this hospitality, there was a sense of unease. Why did the father keep urging them to stay? Was he truly just savoring time with his daughter and her husband? Or did he sense a danger lurking on the roads outside? In a society without a king, the paths between tribes were no longer safe. Bandits, violence, or unseen threats could hide in the shadows. Perhaps the father, with the instincts of a seasoned man, knew that the timing of their departure could seal their fate. To grasp this better, recall another moment in biblical history, when Lot, in Genesis 19, urged the angels to stay in his home to avoid the dangers of Sodom. The father's hospitality in Bethlehem may carry a similar undertone, not just kindness, but protection against something he dared not name. But the Levite, though touched by the warmth, grew impatient. After 5 days, he stood firm, polite but resolute. It's time to go. He led his concubine, along with a servant and their donkeys, away from Bethlehem, heading north toward home. Each step felt heavier, as if destiny awaited them just beyond the horizon. Was the father's delay a warning sign ignored? If they had stayed one more night, would things have turned out differently? Or did the decision to leave at that moment seal their fate, drawing them into a storm no one could foresee? The journey from Bethlehem to the hill country of Ephraim was a long, winding path through the hills and valleys of the Promised Land. As the sun began to set, golden orange light faded, leaving long shadows across the landscape. The travelers, the Levite, his concubine, the young servant, and their donkeys, were weary from the long road. As they passed by Jebus, the city later known as Jerusalem, the servant spoke up, his voice tinged with concern. "Master, why don't we stop here? The day is ending. Let's rest in this city." But the Levite shook his head, his tone firm. "No, this is a city of foreigners, with no Israelites living here. We won't stop in a place outside God's covenant." His words carried deep weight. As a Levite, he understood the significance of the covenant, the bond that tied Israel to God, setting them apart from other nations. Jebus, at that time, belonged to the Jebusites, a pagan people who did not worship God. In his mind, staying there was not just a physical risk, but a spiritual one, as if resting in a foreign city would taint his holiness. But this decision, though rooted in caution, held a bitter irony. Was he placing his trust in the wrong thing? Would his resolve lead them to a place far more dangerous than Jebus? The servant tried again, suggesting Gibeah or Ramah, 2 towns in the territory of Benjamin where Israelites lived. The Levite nodded, and they pressed on as twilight turned to darkness. The sound of donkey hooves echoed on the rocky path, each step like a heartbeat counting down to an unseen destiny. Gibeah, a town of God's people, seemed like a safe haven to rest. But what they didn't know, what you, the viewer, might sense like a storm brewing on the horizon, was that Gibeah was not the refuge they expected. In the shadows of this town, a horrifying truth awaited, ready to expose the soul of a nation that had strayed too far from God. They entered Gibeah seeking safety, but was this their greatest mistake? As the last light of day faded, their fate was sealed. And what happened next will leave you trembling at the truth of an Israel that had lost its way. As the Levite, his concubine, and their servant stepped into Gibeah, the last light of sunset had faded, leaving the town shrouded in darkness. Gibeah, belonging to the tribe of Benjamin, was supposed to be a safe haven, a town of God's people where weary travelers could find welcome. In Israelite culture, hospitality wasn't just a custom, it was a sacred covenant. Welcoming a stranger, offering them food and shelter, was a way to honor God, as if He himself stood at your door. The Bible speaks of this time and again, like when Abraham hosted 3 angelic visitors at Mamre, Genesis 18, or when Lot protected the angels in Sodom. But in Gibeah, what awaited the travelers was not a warm welcome, but a chilling silence. The group stopped at the central square, a place typically bustling with laughter and light from nearby homes. But that night, the square was cold and empty. Not a single door opened, not a voice called out, not a hand extended to help. The exhausted donkeys stood still, their breaths mingling with the chilly air. The concubine, perhaps clutching her cloak tightly, glanced around in unease. The servant, with anxious eyes, might have whispered to the Levite, "Master, something's not right." But the Levite, though weary, held firm, trusting they would find refuge in the land of God's people. Why did no one in Gibeah open their doors? Where had hospitality, a core value of Israel, vanished to? Were the townspeople too afraid to welcome strangers, wary of dangers lurking in the dark? Or had indifference taken root in their hearts, causing them to turn their backs on their own covenant? To understand this, remember that Gibeah was not a foreign city like Jebus, where the Levite refused to stop. This was the land of Benjamin, one of the 12 tribes of Israel, people who carried the bloodline of Jacob, promised the land by God. The silence of Gibeah wasn't just a failure of kindness. It was a sign of a deeper decay, a crack in the soul of the nation. In a moment that seemed hopeless, a flicker of hope emerged. An old man, returning from the fields as darkness enveloped Gibeah, noticed the travelers sitting alone in the square. His voice cut through the silence. "Why are you still here? Has no one taken you in?" When he learned that not a single person in the town had opened their doors, he shook his head, as if unable to believe the indifference of his people. "Come with me," he said. "You'll stay at my house tonight." The Levite, cautious but grateful, replied, "We have food and supplies for ourselves and our donkeys. We just need a roof." The old man smiled. "You'll have more than that. Come, rest." Picture the old man's house, a simple but warm place, with a fire crackling in the hearth, golden orange light dancing on stone walls. The concubine, perhaps still silent, sat down, her hands clasped tightly, as if to ward off her unease. The servant busied himself tending to the donkeys, while the Levite spoke with the old man, feeling a fleeting sense of safety. Food was served, wine poured freely, and for a brief moment, the long journey seemed to have found a resting place. Soft laughter might have echoed, as if all worries had melted away. But this peace was an illusion, fragile as glass before a storm. Suddenly, a knock thundered at the door, loud as a storm, shattering the warmth of the evening. Then another knock, louder, fiercer, until fists pounded the wooden door like war drums, echoing through the night. Outside, a mob had gathered. Depraved men, dark souls from the heart of Gibeah. Their voices rose in unison, demanding the unthinkable. "Bring out the man who came to your house so we can have relations with him." This vile demand, shouted into the darkness, cut through the air like a knife. Pause for a moment to feel the weight of this moment. This wasn't a foreign city like Sodom, where such depravity once brought fire from heaven, Genesis 19. This was Gibeah, land of the tribe of Benjamin, part of God's people. These men weren't Canaanites or Jebusites. They were Israelites, bearing the blood of the covenant, yet standing outside, shamelessly demanding an act that defied every law and moral of God. How could a nation called holy fall into such depravity? What happened to the soul of Gibeah that these men dared to rise, without shame, and demand such a heinous crime in their own land? The atmosphere in the house changed instantly. The old man, once a gracious host, now stood frozen, his eyes likely flickering between fear and despair. The Levite, heart pounding, glanced toward the door, where the pounding grew more ferocious. The concubine, whose emotions the Bible doesn't record, might have shrunk back, sensing the approaching danger. The servant, a minor figure, perhaps stared at his master, waiting for a protective act. But what happened next was a choice that would haunt generations. Instead of barring the door and defending his guest with his life, the old man stepped outside to face the mob. His voice trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what he was about to say. "Please, my brothers, do not do this wicked thing. This man is my guest, under my roof. Do not commit this terrible sin." His plea reflected an ancient Israelite value. Protecting a guest was a sacred duty, almost inviolable. But then, in a shocking moment, he made an unthinkable offer. "Here, I will bring out my virgin daughter and the man's concubine. Do whatever you want with them, but do not do this vile thing to the man." Pause to feel the horror of this proposal. The old man, in his desire to protect his guest, was willing to sacrifice his own daughter and the concubine. Two women, two human beings made in God's image, reduced to objects to appease the mob. What could drive a father to make such a choice? Did he truly believe this sacrifice would preserve his household's honor? Or had fear of the mob clouded his judgment? In that culture, women were often seen as property, valued less than men. But this proposal crossed every moral boundary. It laid bare a painful truth. Even in the land of God's people, a person's worth could be trampled so easily. But the story doesn't end there. The mob, unmoved by the plea, pressed their demand. And then, in an act colder than the old man's offer, the Levite took action. He seized his concubine, the woman who had left him, whom he had traveled to reclaim, who had sat beside him in Bethlehem's warm house, and pushed her out to the mob. The Bible records it with painful clarity. They abused and raped her through the night, not for a moment, but for endless hours, until the first rays of dawn appeared. When they finally released her, she staggered back to the house, her body broken, her spirit shattered, and collapsed at the threshold, her hand outstretched as if reaching for safety, for mercy, but too weak to live. As the concubine fell at the threshold, her hand outstretched in a silent plea, did anyone hear her cry for help? The Levite's act was not just a personal betrayal, but a mirror reflecting the decay of an entire nation. But what he did next will leave you speechless. As morning light broke over Gibeah, the Levite opened the door, stepped out, and saw his concubine lying there, motionless, her hand still stretched toward the threshold. The Bible records no emotion from him, no tears, no cries, no remorse. Instead, he spoke a chilling command, "Get up, let's go." But she didn't respond, because she couldn't. She was dead, broken in body and soul after a night of brutal abuse by the mob. Picture this moment. A man who had traveled miles to reclaim his concubine, who had shared meals with her in Bethlehem, now looked down at her lifeless body without a trace of grief. Did he feel anything? Or had his heart grown numb, like the society around him? But what the Levite did next defies all imagination. He didn't hold a funeral, didn't pray, didn't bury her according to custom. Instead, he took her body back to his home in Ephraim. And then, in a horrifying act, he took a knife, held the body of the woman who had died after a night of torment, and cut her into 12 pieces, limb by limb, with calculated precision. Not in haste, not in madness, but with cold deliberation. Each piece was sent to one of the 12 tribes of Israel, accompanied by a message, not written in ink, but in blood. Imagine being an elder of a tribe, receiving such a package. Opening it, you find a piece of human flesh, soaked in blood, alongside a letter recounting what happened in Gibeah. A woman abused to death, with no one to save her, and this crime committed by Israelites, by the tribe of Benjamin. Was this justice, or the rage of a broken man? Was it a desperate cry to awaken a nation asleep in indifference? This gruesome act, though abhorrent, carried undeniable symbolic power. 12 pieces for 12 tribes, a condemnation, a call for justice, a mirror reflecting Israel's painful truth. To understand this better, recall another biblical story. When Saul, Israel's first king, cut a pair of oxen into pieces and sent them to the tribes to summon them against an enemy. 1 Samuel 11:7. The Levites' act carried a similar tone, but far darker. It wasn't just a call to battle. It was an accusation against his own people. The Bible records that all who received this message were shocked and grieved, declaring, "Nothing like this has happened since the day Israel came out of Egypt." Judges 19:30. The Levites' act of dismemberment was not merely personal. It was a sounding alarm, echoing through the tribes, forcing them to confront the truth. Evil didn't come from external enemies, but from within their own hearts. But would this message bring justice, or only lead to greater tragedy? As the 12 pieces were sent out, Israel's fate was forever changed, and what followed would expose the painful truth of a nation that had lost its soul. The 11 tribes gathered at Mizpah, a sacred meeting place, to confront the crime. They were not only enraged by the brutality in Gibeah, but also because it was committed by their own brothers, the tribe of Benjamin, a part of Israel's family. This wasn't the sin of foreigners, like the Canaanites or Jebusites, but a betrayal from within the nation chosen by God. The tribes demanded justice. Hand over the wicked men of Gibeah so we can punish them. But instead of cooperating, the tribe of Benjamin refused. They stood to defend the depraved men, as if tribal honor mattered more than justice. Why did Benjamin choose to protect evil? Were they blinded by tribal loyalty, or had decay taken root so deeply that they could no longer discern right from wrong? Benjamin's refusal was like pouring oil on a fire. The 11 tribes declared war, and the promised land, once filled with songs of praise to God, now echoed with the clash of swords and cries of anguish. Civil war erupted, brother against brother. Israel's blood spilled on its own soil. The battles raged, brutal and relentless, with tens of thousands falling. Benjamin's cities were burned to the ground, families shattered. And when the smoke cleared, only 600 Benjaminite men remained, hiding in the rock of Rimmon. A tribe once vital to Israel now teetered on the brink of extinction. Fields once lush and green were stained with blood. Villages once vibrant were reduced to ashes. The victorious tribes looked upon the devastation and asked themselves, "What have we done?" The justice they sought had become a whirlwind of destruction, sweeping away not only the guilty, but also the innocent. The victory of the 11 tribes left a haunting question. Was justice worth the cost when a whole nation paid in blood? As Benjamin faced near annihilation, a new fear arose. The fear of losing a part of Israel forever. But what they did next will shock you even more. Standing amid the ruins of civil war, the 11 tribes faced a painful reality. The tribe of Benjamin, one of Jacob's 12 branches, was left with only 600 men and no women to continue their lineage. If Benjamin vanished, God's covenant with the 12 tribes would be broken. The initial fury gave way to fear and regret. They gathered, wept, and prayed. How can we save Benjamin from disappearing? But instead of seeking God's guidance, they turned to human solutions, solutions that led to new, deeper violence. First, they discovered that the people of Jabesh-Gilead, a city of the tribe of Gad, had not joined the war against Benjamin. In their anger, they decided to punish Jabesh-Gilead for this betrayal. They attacked the city, killing every man and married woman, sparing only 400 virgin girls. These girls, with no choice, no voice, were seized and given to 400 of the surviving Benjaminite men. Imagine the terror of those girls, torn from peaceful lives, thrust into a fate they didn't choose, made sacrificial pawns to save a tribe. How could an act of violence be seen as a solution to another tragedy? Did the tribes realize they were repeating the mistake of Gibeah, where a woman was sacrificed to appease evil? But the problem wasn't resolved. 200 Benjaminite men still had no wives, and the tribes faced another dilemma. They had sworn before God not to give their daughters to Benjamin. Instead of seeking God's forgiveness or guidance, they devised a cunning, human plan. They recalled an annual festival at Shiloh, where young women danced in joy. They told the Benjaminites, "Ambush the festival, kidnap the girls as they dance, and we won't interfere." And so, in a heart-wrenching scene, 200 girls were abducted, dragged from their joyful dance, from their families, from their lives, to become wives to men they had never met. Picture the scene. The music and laughter of the festival replaced by cries for help as the girls were pulled into the darkness. The Bible doesn't record their emotions, but we can imagine their fear, helplessness, and loss. Did the tribes believe this was justice? Or were they so exhausted, so desperate, that they justified violence with twisted vows? How could God's people, who once crossed the Red Sea and received the law at Sinai, fall into a cycle of violence to fix violence? Their actions were not just mistakes. They were a warning of what happens when people try to right evil with solutions devoid of God's guidance. The story of Gibeah and its aftermath stems from a painful truth. In those days, Israel had no king. Judges 21:25. No king meant not just the absence of a ruler on a throne, but the lack of a guiding voice, an authority holding the people accountable to God. When no one stands to correct wrongs, when no one sets boundaries, people begin to live by their own desires. In Gibeah, no one stopped the depraved mob. In the Civil War, no one called for reconciliation before blood was spilled. And when the girls were kidnapped, no one stood up to say, "This is wrong." The lack of accountability turned a nation chosen by God into a chaotic mob, where evil grew unchecked. Think about your life today. Who holds you accountable? Who dares to tell you you're on the wrong path, even when you don't want to hear it? It could be a friend, a family member, or a faith community. But without someone, without boundaries, or a correcting voice, you can drift like Israel. A small decision, like ignoring a wrong, can lead to far greater consequences. In Gibeah, the town's indifference led to a woman's death. In the Civil War, unchecked anger led to a tribe's devastation. A single unchecked decision can lead you where? Reflect before it's too late. For Israel's story shows that without accountability, chaos isn't just possible, it's inevitable. Israel's decline in Judges didn't happen overnight. It was a slow process, where the people gradually drifted from God, the one who rescued them from Egypt, led them through the desert, and gave them the promised land. Each generation, each small decision, each time they chose their own way over God's. pushed them further from their source of strength. In Gibeah, this drift showed in the mob's depravity. In the Civil War, it appeared in the tribe's uncontrolled anger. And in their flawed solutions, it was evident in their lack of prayer and guidance from God. Think of a moment in your life when you looked back and asked, "How did I get here?" Perhaps you said something you swore you'd never say, did something you thought impossible, or hurt someone you promised to protect. Sin doesn't come like a storm, but like a fog, creeping through moments of neglect. A day without prayer, a week without church, a small compromise. What part of your life has grown silent to God's voice? When you drift from Him, the unthinkable becomes possible. Not because you're weak, but because you're unprotected without your source of strength. Jesus said in John 15:5, "I am the vine, you are the branches. Apart from me, you can do nothing." Israel forgot this truth, and the cost was a chain of tragedies. But this lesson isn't just for them, it's for us. A reminder that closeness to God is the only shield against falling. Though the story in Judges 19 to 21 is filled with pain and violence, it doesn't end in despair. After the Civil War, after the flawed solutions, the tribe of Benjamin wasn't erased. The 600 surviving men returned to their land. Burned cities were rebuilt, families restored, and life, though scarred, went on. This was no coincidence. God, in His infinite mercy, opened a path for restoration, even after Israel's horrific mistakes. His grace didn't erase the consequences, the dead didn't return, the wounds didn't heal instantly, but it offered hope, a chance to begin again. Think of a time in your life when everything seemed to collapse. Perhaps you made wrong choices, hurt others, or carried scars you thought would never heal. But this story reminds us that God never gives up. He didn't abandon Israel, no matter how far they strayed. He didn't abandon Benjamin, though they were nearly destroyed. And He won't abandon you. What could God do with your mistakes if He can restore a broken nation? His grace is a promise that no matter how far you've gone, you're never too far to return. The Bible closes Judges with the words, "In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes." But even in that chaos, God was present, working, opening a path for His people to return. This story, though dark, is a reminder that the light of grace can pierce the deepest darkness, bringing hope to those ready to turn back to Him. The story of Judges 19 to 21 leaves us with a piercing question. How are you living? With God as your king, guiding your every step, or by your own desires, doing what seems right to you? This story, though dark and painful, isn't just a chapter of Israel's history. It's a mirror reflecting what happens when a nation or an individual strays from its source. From the indifference in Gibeah to the bloodshed of civil war, from flawed solutions to scars that never fully heal, we see the cost of living without accountability, without God. But more importantly, we see an eternal truth. Even in the deepest darkness, the light of grace can still break through. Though Israel fell into chaos, though Benjamin was nearly wiped out, God didn't abandon them. He opened a path to rebuild, to heal, to move forward, even with scars. If God can do that for a broken nation, He can do it for you. You may carry wrong choices, unspoken pain, or wounds you think will never heal. But this story reminds us that God's grace is always present, ready to meet you in the midst of your struggles, ready to lead you back to Him. Will you choose to walk that path? If this story has touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, a friend, a family member, or anyone seeking hope amid mistakes. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment to let me know how this story impacted you. Your support will help spread these profound lessons far and wide, reminding everyone that even in the darkest moments, God is still at work. Thank you for joining me on this heart-wrenching yet meaningful journey through Judges. Come back to explore more Bible stories, where truth, however difficult, always draws us closer to God. May God bless and guide you, so you always live with Him as your King, today and forever.